Hi, Taisha. Welcome, 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 everyone. Right on time. Okay, welcome, everyone. I'm going to jump right in since everyone seems to be on time here. Good evening. I am Dr. Siobhan Joseph coming to you from Trinidad and Tobago. It's 8 o'clock here, and this is a continuation of our PCOS series that happens on Wednesday nights. So, welcome. Today's topic really has to do more with insulin, and I recognize more and more as I speak to women about their weight and their health. It's sometimes a difficult situation to really conquer what's going on with your nutrition. So it's important to understand the foundation of what's happening with your body. And what I'm going to talk tonight about is what's known as insulin resistance, which really impacts about 70% of women who've been diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the first thing to know is exactly what is insulin. We hear about it, we talk about it a lot, but what is it? It's a hormone actually that we produce. So a lot of times when women come in to see me, they say, I have a hormonal imbalance. And the issue there is which hormone, because not just our ovaries produce hormones, we produce hormones from any level in our brain to pituitary gland or adrenal gland or ovaries, different hormones with different specific roles. And insulin is a very important hormone. We can't even go an hour without insulin in our system. And it's a hormone that if we don't have it, we literally will die. And if we have too much of it, it causes problems as well too. It is known as a storage hormone. And the premise of how your body works is every cell in our body requires glucose as a source of energy. And our insulin hormone is produced in the pancreas, which is located in your abdomen. And insulin is secreted as we go through our daily nutrition as we eat. Insulin is secreted on demand to basically take our sugar that's broken down from food and drive it into our cells. So the best way to explain this is a very common analogy that's used to explain insulin, which is the lock and the key theory. So it's almost like your cells are a room with a door, and the insulin is functioning as a key that allows the glucose to enter that doorway into your cells. So the insulin unlocks the door to allow the cells to take up the glucose. With insulin resistance, what ends up happening is the key is used so many times over and over that you become tolerant to your own insulin. And in that situation, your brain pushes your pancreas to make more insulin, so you end up having all of this excess insulin. And that door where that key is supposed to fit becomes overused, and the lock is worn down basically, and the blood glucose levels remain elevated instead of being taken up into the cells. And then more insulin is produced, and that excess insulin in your system creates problems and symptoms, in addition to having inadequate breakdown of your sugar as well too. Welcome to everyone who's joining. We just started. So basically, the lock becomes broken to each and every individual cell, and you end up having elevated insulin levels, but ineffective use of your insulin. And that's essentially what insulin resistance is thought to be. Now, the insulin as a hormone is important because it's something that's secreted. It's also something that could be defective from a genetic issue, as with any other hormones, or you could start off having normal hormonal balance, and then changes that occur within your body as life goes on may affect and impact your insulin function. And again, most of us don't consider it a hormone, but it absolutely is the hormone that we need on a daily basis. I have some notes that I'm reading here. I'm a little nervous to be live. So the the insulin resistance occurs when your body stops responding to your normal levels of insulin, and then you produce excess or even higher levels of insulin that your body still doesn't respond to. And then over time, your pancreas gland becomes worn out and worn down, and it doesn't make any insulin or not enough to match what the body needs. Being overweight, especially having extra fat stored in the abdominal area, around the liver area, really increases, in addition to what's happening, increases the body's need for more insulin. So with this ongoing insufficient insulin action, you then progress to developing diabetes, which is pretty much when your daily sugar levels in your blood are elevated. And this excess sugar that's not going through that doorway, not being absorbed into our cells, floats around in your bloodstream and creates a lot of problems in a lot of the very tiny blood vessels. And essentially, diabetes is a combination of complications of having excess sugar in your bloodstream. So, for instance, a diabetic will have blindness as a complication because the excess sugar in the very tiny blood vessels and behind our eyes become impacted, and they get glaucoma related to diabetes and blindness. This is over many years. These complications develop small blood vessels in our kidneys. Diabetics will develop kidney failure, poor wound healing, poor vascular circulation issues, because this excess sugar is a problem as well. So the signs of, they're classic signs to know if you're actually dealing with an insulin resistance. And those classic signs, really, I broke it down to just 5 classic ways to know. The first one is if you've noticed in yourself having very severe hunger attacks, or hangry is the term. If you are, usually going through your usual routine, but when you're hungry, it's a very intense situation where you have a drive that you must eat at that point in time. And if that starts happening with feeling shaky, jittery, feeling to faint, that's a first classic sign that there's something going on with your blood sugar levels, and you're probably resistant to your insulin. So you're very, very hungry, and you are getting symptomatic with that hunger as well too. It really indicates that your blood sugar levels are not stable. If someone is already a diabetic, that's usually an indicator for them at that time to either eat something, or sometimes their sugar is too elevated and they need to take their medication. But if you're not your diabetic and you're sort of battling through insulin resistance, this is a first classic sign where that hunger really is that hangry, and you get physical symptoms when you're hungry as well too. The second classic sign or indicator of having an insulin resistance is not just weight gain, but weight gain specific to the belly, the tummy area. So you start getting a weight gain that's disproportionate. Your arms are thin, your legs are fit and thin. No matter what you do, you tend to still collect weight around the belly, the stomach area. So increased belly weight. And that's been actually deemed as a major sign of insulin resistance and potential diabetes, when there's centralized obesity and the rest of the body is not putting on weight at the same rate. Sign number 3 of insulin resistance is basically, despite working out, I'm hitting the gym, I'm doing everything I need to do, I'm eating salads, I'm trying my best, despite anything, my weight just will not budge. And that resistance for weight loss is another indicator that your insulin is not helping you, because your insulin is what's going to really drive your metabolism to burn fuel and burn your sugars. And even in the best scenario of working out adequately and actually eating healthy, and your weight still isn't budging, that might be an indicator that you should get evaluated for insulin resistance. Right? Number 4, it's a big one because it impacts the skin, and it's a visual indicator of insulin resistance. Number 4 would be a condition that's called acanthosis nigricans. Don't hold me to the pronunciation of that, but basically it's a very specific skin change to people with insulin resistance. And with this skin change, you start getting these patches of hyperpigmented, which means dark skin, but not just dark skin, it's thicker, dark skin with a raised appearance and a very velvety appearance, where the skin has lost some of its very characteristic features, and it just becomes thicker, darker skin. It tends to be the skin in areas that fold in on itself. So neck, armpits, even below the breast area, the groin for sure is another area where those folds may happen. And this is called acanthosis. And this is a very specific pathway that happens with elevated insulin. So remember, you're making insulin. Your body's not using it as it should to burn and put glucose into your cells. So then your brain sees all this excess glucose. Your brain then tells the pancreas, make more insulin. You make even more insulin, and then that sets off a actual physical change in your skin to cause this acanthosis. Again, that's these raised, velvety, thick patches of skin, dark skin that occurs in the folds of areas that fold. The acanthosis that's related to insulin resistance is reversible. It can happen for a few other reasons as well. But typically, if it's related to insulin resistance, you really don't need any skin treatments for acanthosis in a topical sense, because the problem with the darker area in the neck and the darker areas in the armpit, it's an internal problem that's causing it. So there's no bleaching product, there's no topical product that's going to fix acanthosis, but it is reversible if the sugar levels are managed better and the insulin resistance is managed better as well too. So that's number 4 as a classic sign of insulin resistance. And the 5th one is one that they actually rolled into the listing of signs of insulin resistance more recently, which would be skin tags. So skin tags are just these little tiny, almost squishy little extra tags of skin that tends to be anywhere around the face, the neck area, again in the armpits as well too, but they can occur anywhere. And as someone who's never had skin tags, if you start forming skin tags more and more, you're noticing them more, that's also an accepted classic sign that your insulin is no longer working as effectively for you as it should. Right, so just to recap for everyone who's joined in the last few minutes, we just started. I was just listing out the 5 classic signs of insulin resistance. If anyone wants to ask any questions during the session, you can for sure. I try to answer them to my best of my ability. So classic signs of insulin resistance. Sign number 1, hangry. That's the best way I could put it. You get hangry. You're hungry and you're agitated with that hunger, and it's almost comes on like a very severe attack of hunger. And it's unusual for you, but it starts happening more frequently. And then with time, you start having physical symptoms when you're hungry. You start feeling to faint, you feel shaky, even temperature changes, you feel jittery. And that's a sign that your blood sugar levels are not stable. And that's one of the key signs that there might be an insulin resistance happening with you. The second one would be increased belly fat. So again, your arms are fit and thin, your legs are fit, but you gain weight, and you're gaining weight in a very centralized location. That's actually considered one of the major signs that there might be an insulin resistance in someone. Sign number 3 is the individual who's working out, eating right, doing everything that they should, and their weight is budging. Hi, yes, I'm talking about you. So tip number 3, classic sign number 3, is no matter what I do, my weight gain is remaining in the central area. And that has a lot to do with the liver and the organs that also collect a lot of fat. These are the visceral organs, as we call them. So there's fat layers around these organs as well too. And this type of fat builds up in the central area where most of our organs are, because those organs rely on glucose to function. And if there's a imbalance in how the glucose is being absorbed, then this triggers this accumulation of central fat, and it's very difficult to lose that type of centralized fat. And again, it's a classic thin body, but you have a pot belly basically going on. Sign number 4 would be the acanthosis nigricans, and that's a very, very classic sign of insulin resistance. And this is a direct skin change that happens when your own insulin is not effective. So your brain makes your pancreas make more insulin, and that excess insulin triggers a very dark velvety, raised, thick skin in any area that folds. And I made the point, it's very important. Do not bleach this type of skin change. Do not use anything topical. It is not dirty skin. It is not, you might even see children with it. You know, children get teased for acanthosis a lot because it has this dark appearance, but it's not dirt. It's actually an internal problem. And once you start reversing the issue and working on the glucose levels and working on the insulin resistance more specifically, this change will reduce and acanthosis will improve. And then the fifth classic sign would be skin tags. Yeah, I said skin tags. So skin tags popping up around your torso, your neck area, your armpit. Those are all signs of, hey, maybe I should get evaluated and see what's going on. Now, a lot of times women are diagnosed with PCOS based on their physical appearance, period irregularities, excess facial hair growth, also the finding of polycystic changes in the ovaries on ultrasound. But blood work is essential. Blood work is important. Thyroid disease overlaps pretty heavily with polycystic ovarian syndrome. I feel it's so important for any woman, especially the screening recommendation is over age 25. Everyone should have their thyroid screened. But even starting in an 18 to 19-year-old who's having some signs of irregularities or symptoms that are just not able to be explained, the thyroid screening is very important. So the insulin resistance, some of the symptoms are classic for that, but when you're diagnosed with PCOS, ruling out other problems is important. And in terms of screening for insulin resistance, that's important for anyone who is diagnosed with PCOS. All right, so we have a question. When do I need to come see you? Well, anytime you can get an available appointment, we can have a consultation, see where you're at, see what might be your issue as well too. You can click on any of our links and see our website for information. So that someone's asking about fatty liver, and I'm coming up to that actually right now. So in terms of the other causes, PCOS is just one factor with insulin resistance. There are other features of insulin resistance as well too. But I just wanted to drive that point home. If you were told you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, it needs to be backed up with testing to validate that it is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and also make sure that you don't have any overlapping conditions with that as well too. And I was using the thyroid as an example. It's not the only example, but the thyroid is an example as well. So just to understand as well, if you were to screen yourself for insulin resistance, medications for PCOS, I will definitely speak about that as well. Thank you for the question. So your normal fasting blood sugar level should never be above 100 in general. So if you're able to check your sugar and you haven't eaten anything and you've been fasting for at least 8 to 12 hours previously, the range will be there. It ranges between 80 to 130, but anyone over 100 is probably battling glucose excess, insulin resistance as well too. There's another test that's done that's called a hemoglobin A1C. Very cheap, very quick. You don't need to be fasting. Available in any lab. And that test is an indicator of your average daily blood sugar in the past 3 months. So I test this a lot of times in the office. And I can tell sometimes when somebody's been cheating on their diet, if their A1C number was good, and then Christmas happened, and then we checked again, and there's a 3-month gap, and it's gone up. So that's another reliable way to screen for someone who may be dealing with some insulin resistance. The A1C is a percentage of the red blood cells with hemoglobin that actually had like glucose stuck to them in the bloodstream. And it means that your blood sugar levels were elevated beyond what the norm was. The goal with the A1C is usually anywhere between 4 to 5.6%. If you've been tested for this before, you can look back to see what yours was. Remembering, however, an A1C number only reflects the preceding 3 months. If someone is a 6.0%, it means that their daily sugars have been rising and not well managed, and they probably are pre-diabetic with insulin resistance at this point in time. 6.5 or higher is a diabetic. Can you have insulin resistance in a normal? Yes, you can. That's a great question. So if your insulin resistance is actually on a daily basis being managed appropriately, you're eating the right things, you're trying your best, then your fasting blood glucose will be normal and your A1C level will be normal based on what your daily activities are. It doesn't change the underlying insulin resistance. You can eat differently and create more problems with insulin resistance if you already have it. But you can have an elevated A1C last year, do better, and then this year you check again, it may improve, or you've received treatment of some kind. The example of the A1C, if someone's A1C level is 7, they're diabetic. And that means their average daily sugar is 154. At any point in the day when we check it, it's around the 150 range, which it shouldn't be. You should really always, between eating and activities, hang out around 80 to 130, and that's it. Once you start climbing, there's too much sugar in the bloodstream as well, right? So that's in terms of screening. You can also do sugar testing. Women who've been pregnant would be more familiar with the glucose test, where you have to drink this very unpleasant tasting, because I've tasted it, glucola substance. You drink it, it's like liquid sugar, and then your sugar is checked. Well, you check your sugar fasting, you drink the liquid, and then you check your sugar 2 to 3 times following that, and then we look at parameters to diagnose someone with diabetes. This test sometimes is a 3-hour ordeal sitting in the laboratory. So a lot of times now we will do the random glucose, we'll do the A1C, and then if those are problematic, we move on to the additional testing where you have to drink the glucose to diagnose that as well. Okay, so in terms of insulin resistance, those are just some of the key ways, quick and dirty, easy ways for us to check to see if someone is at risk for that as well. Right? If anyone has any questions so far, you can ask me. But again, so insulin resistance, basically, if you have insulin resistance, you have developed an abnormal response to your own insulin. And this happens gradually for most people. Besides polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I said about 70% of women with PCOS will have issues with their insulin and insulin resistance. Just in general, if someone is not even polycystic, or if it's a male, they may have insulin resistance as a consequence of obesity. Stress is a key factor for insulin resistance, so you don't even need to be obese. Obesity is one. Second factor for insulin resistance is stress-induced, and this is important. Everyone asks me, can stress cause this? Can stress cause that? I never take stress off the table. And stress is a vague term. And stress is what is stressful to you. Basically, we have a system of different hormones that control our day-to-day. We have cortisol hormone, we have growth hormones. I'm not going to list them all out. But these hormones, for the most part, help the body to respond to stress. For instance, you know about fight or flight reactions. If your body is stressed, it doesn't mean that you're being attacked or you're running through the forest. But if you just really had a stressful day, or your immune system is weakened for some reason, or you're not eating as you should, or you're not eating in a way to nourish your immune system, your body will be stressed. I see Steph ask, if someone can get their A1C down from 7 to 5, does that mean they're no longer diabetes? That's a great question. If you get it down to 5, it means your diabetes is managed. You don't get to, not be diabetic anymore, but you would have diabetic potential always. So bringing it down to 5 is a win, and it means that you actually would not need medications as much if you did it without medications and you did it with nutrition and weight management. You still are diabetic, but you're managing the diabetes. I hope that answers your question. So back to the stress. So if I'm stressed all day, my body has to produce adrenaline as a consequence just from me being stressed. And that surge in adrenaline is not going to trigger what it should naturally, which is to allow me to get an extra boost of energy to run from my attacker. It's more, I'm stressed, I've had a bad day, I have all this excess stress hormones being created, you're welcome. And that now drives me to store fat in case I'm going to run through the forest. And that's how insulin resistance can happen as a consequence of stress as well too. And stress is unique to each individual. And my advice with stress is always figure it out, identify the source of it, and eradicate it as best as possible, or figure out a way to cope with it as well, because it does have a physical impact. And I don't know how many IG lives I would have to do to talk about stress, but definitely that's one key one listed associated with insulin resistance as well too. So that's important. If someone is on medications for different reasons, they may develop insulin resistance as well too. And these are things that happen outside of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So if I have lupus, or I have severe lung disorder or asthma, and I have to take steroids medications for some reason, prednisone is a common one that's prescribed for different reasons, vasculitis, MS, and so forth. The medications can trigger insulin resistance in an individual who are chronically on these meds. So it's important to discuss with your GP if you're on medications for substantial time as to whether or not we should be screening your insulin as well too. The other medications that can do it include, I have a lot of clients who may be on HIV antiviral medications, which are important. They need them to survive. But those may also trigger insulin resistance in those individuals. Another common time for someone to have an insulin resistance is pregnancy. You have to gain weight over the course of 40 weeks. So the weight gain I talked about being very centralized is typical and similar to that what happens to pregnancy as well too. And that's in a nutshell the non-PCOS related reasons for insulin resistance. For those of you who just joined, I saw our numbers went up a little bit. I just started talking about the classic signs of insulin resistance, and I just touched on 5 of them. Again, severe acute hunger attacks, or what I call hangry. You're very angry when you're hungry, you're shaky, jittery, feel to faint. It's a key indicator that your blood sugar levels are actually not being well managed and they're unstable. The second sign would be excess belly weight. So you're gaining weight in the central area. That's now considered a major sign of insulin resistance as well. The third is that individual who is exercising, doing what's right, and still not losing any weight. Their weight has just sort of, just stayed right as it is, no matter what they're doing. Their insulin may not be effective for them. The fourth and fifth signs of insulin resistance would be a classic skin change, which is called acanthosis. An acanthosis, silly word, I find it silly to pronounce. It's basically that very thick, velvety change that happens with a very dark skin, typically in the neck area, the armpits, under the breast, down in the groin area. And this is a skin change very specific to your insulin just really sitting in your bloodstream, not doing anything effective, and that excess insulin triggers the skin change. I'm repeating myself because it's very important not to purchase any bleaching skin topical creams for this change, because it's an internal metabolic change that's causing your skin to look this way. And it's important to be screened for diabetes, screened for insulin resistance. And once you manage it, the skin will return to its normal pigmentation as well. And then skin tags, bunch of skin tags. Skin tags happen as people age. Skin tags happen as people become more obese with age as well. And that is now added onto the list as an indicator that someone is dealing with insulin resistance. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop in with the questions. I'll try to answer them as much as I can. So next up, I wanted to just address, let me see here. Okay. I'm going to talk about what you should avoid if you think you have an insulin resistance happening. And the things to avoid, number one, the bad boy on the list would be to avoid any and all refined sugar. That would be cane sugar, brown sugar, corn syrup, even artificial sweeteners, your cakes, your cookies, your cereals, sodas of any kind, even some yogurts, which you have to be careful with yogurts as a food choice, sauces, condiments, your ketchup, barbecue sauce, all of those have added refined sugars in them. And this is not good. This is not good at all when there's an insulin resistance in the picture, just in general, because remember, anyone can become insulin resistant. There are some genetic predispositions that can happen, but at the same time, you don't know what you necessarily have genetically in store. And I'll talk about that in a bit as well, too, where genetics are concerned. But in general, avoid any and all sugars. And this is because we just talked about you having a high blood glucose level, because insulin, remember, is the key that unlocks the door in our cells to drive sugar in. And if insulin is not being effective anymore, then that sugar in the bloodstream is extremely elevated, and you're going to have a problem if now in your daily diet you're having these refined sugars and processed foods. So you want to avoid all, because then you end up having quite a spike in your blood glucose level. You feel ill. I talk about this a lot in the office, because a lot of times people have cravings. That these cravings are actually, as I talked, one of the key signs of insulin resistance is this hunger attack. And then when you choose this sugary processed option for that craving, you have this insane spike in your sugar levels. Your insulin has not been working for some time, and you feel ill. You may get that sugar high, but when you come down from that high, it's not a good thing at all. So definitely you want to avoid those. Alternatives would be to try honey, even maple syrup. Definitely fruit always is a great source of sugar. But any of sugar at all, whether it's honey or more natural sugar, you want to do very small amounts at that time. The second thing you want to do, looking at my notes, if anyone has any questions in the meantime, you can ask me. Number 2, you want to avoid white bread and white flour. There's really no nutritional value in these. They're bleach products. By the time they have left the farm and ended up on the shelf, it's no longer a food item in my mind. White bread, white flour, they are very quickly digested into sugar. And by the time you eat it, it becomes sugar. You haven't really gained any nutritional value or impact from it at all. So avoid all white bread, white flour, in addition to number 1, which is sugar. So you want to be a bit more creative with your recipes. You want to be more creative with your recipes. There's a question here. Why do people say that bananas and mangoes are bad for diabetics? Well, exactly. So those specific fruits, diabetics can have those, but usually in small amounts, and also with moderation. Those fruits are very high sugar content. So bananas and mangoes specifically will create a very rapid sugar spike when they're eaten by people who can't manage their sugar as well. So number 2, white bread, white flour, you want to avoid those. As alternatives, you can choose to use almond flour, coconut flour. There's a lot more coming into the marketplace where we can use as alternatives to white bread and white flour. These have less sugar content in them. They're lower carbs. They are higher in fibers, and they take a longer time to digest and become sugar. And if you must have the bread, then make sure it's more of a multigrain or whole grain choice as well too. Ezekiel bread, which is really expensive here in Trinidad, it's one of those sprouted breads that also have a very high fiber, low sugar balance to them as well. Let me see. Trini 10 Chicks says, is yogurt with nuts and cereal 3 times or 4 times a week too much? It might be too much. It depends on when you're taking it and what your activity level is like. And then the sugar content in the yogurt, because people make and sell yogurts and sometimes they add white sugar into there for flavor, and you want to be aware of those. So you want to be particular with looking at the labeling on your product, reading the sugar content in it. If it's your daily percent of sugar met with that one yogurt, then that's not an option for you. But if it's a healthy option, low-fat yogurt's a great option as well too. You can do them 3 to 4 times a week with your nuts. But the cereal flakes, did I talk about cereal flakes? I didn't talk about cereal flakes. But cereal flakes, you be careful what we're calling cereal as well too. Always read the labeling. Look at the amount of sugar that's contained in what some of these packaged goods are being sold as cereals. They may not necessarily be nutritional for you. Number 3 in what to avoid, and I don't want to sound racist, but I said white sugar, I said white bread, and now we're at white potatoes. So Yes, we do need to pay more attention to the labels. Exactly. The white potatoes have a very quick sugar spike situation after you eat them. So as an alternative, you want to do ground provision if you have access to it. If you're in the Caribbean, that's everywhere. So ground provision are more complicated carbohydrates, so they take longer to break down. The white potatoes, as I said, instant to sugar, you get that spike. And you can substitute instead with sweet potatoes. Cauliflower is a great option to mash and make mashed cauliflower if you want that potato. But beware of white potatoes if you're struggling with weight, and if you're struggling especially with central weight, and if you're struggling with signs of insulin resistance. You're very welcome. All questions are welcome. Number 4 is pasta, my fave. No pasta or very little pasta. It is, out of everything that I'm listing off here, I believe pasta is the most quickly digested into sugar. And you have to be careful with pasta because there's so many different variations of pasta, so many options, and you think one's healthy and the other's not. But pasta, just any pasta at all, becomes sugar very, very quickly because of how pasta is created and what it essentially is. You even have to be careful of couscous, which seems one of the, people do quinoa and as a substitute in trying to be healthy, but pasta in itself, couscous is actually little balls of pasta, so it's the same problem with the sugar. So be very cautious. Most quickly digested to sugar. Now, this is not a strict list to avoid. If you are active and you're working out and you're keeping your physical activity as a priority, then yeah, you can have your pasta. But if you're relatively sedentary, inactive, you're struggling with weight, or while you're in your weight loss program, these are the things that you really have to pay attention to as to when you're struggling and your weight is plateaued and you're not losing weight, where can I make adjustments? And definitely you want to avoid pasta if there's any kind of an insulin resistance that you're battling as well. So the pasta situation, they have alternatives. Yes, exactly. So someone asked about multigrain. So multigrain pasta is what I'm coming to as an option, but still be careful with the multigrain. And rice pasta, I would say no. Rice definitely is one of those easily broken down into sugar. You want to stay more on the complex side. So in terms of the pastas, most places now you can find chickpea options, lentil pasta, black bean pastas, but be creative, keep an open mind. You may not like some of these options because we've sort of been groomed all our life to eat one way, but keep in mind the goal is that insulin resistance being corrected. The goal is that central weight being addressed. So if you are in that moment of trying to achieve your goal, then definitely avoid pasta as best possible. Exactly. There are cassava and sweet potato pasta options as well too. And here in Trinidad, we have local brands that are bringing out these pastas as well. And everything in moderation still. And if you do still have your pasta, maybe it's going to be on the day when you've worked out for an hour or you've done 3 workouts that week, and then you can have your pasta as well too, right? The 5th one about what to avoid is, don't kill me, all juice, all soda. No. This is if you're struggling with insulin resistance, you're seeing signs, the acanthosis issue, the skin tags, the central obesity, the weight that's plateauing, not going anywhere. These are all classic signs of insulin resistance. Your appetite has, these really bad ricochets where you have this attack of hunger and symptoms with your hunger and your sugars are not well. So the juice and soda, no. I may have to start posting healthy recipes. Maybe I might. I don't know. We'll see. But juice and soda, hell knows. Yes, even at 100% apple juice. Sorry. Again, the goal is to... I knew you guys would hate me for the juice one. The goal is to improve things, right? The apple juice is 100%, but the fruits have a lot of sugar in them, and that box of apple juice is pretty much all the sugar contained in the apple brought in. Thank you. Everyone's answering drink water. pretty much drink water. If you have access to coconut water, that's beautiful. Coconut water is a complex combination of minerals and magnesium, and there's potassium, which your muscles need and for toning, and also it is hydrating, really, really hydrating. It's nature's Gatorade. So coconut water, drink regular water. No one drinks enough water. I know no one here today drank sufficient water, and if you did, great for you, but no one does for the most part. And if you have an issue with the water, or people would say water is boring, then make it not boring. You add some fruit to it, or you flavor your water. But any juice or soda, basically it's liquid sugar, and that process of digesting that the fruit that the flour and the bread and so forth, that quick spike to sugar, it's even quicker with the liquids that are actually sugar, the juice and the soda. So no juice, no soda. You want to do water. You want to put fruit in the water. Lemon water is great for the ladies in here. Lemon water works beautifully for any of your PMS cramping. Exactly. Ginger, cucumbers, lemon. Make your water fancy and make it a thing and make it a priority as well too. Coconut water is perfect, and all weight loss programs are centered around hydration and adequate water. And what I also say, and this is tip 5 with juice and soda, you're thirsty sometimes, and a lot of times thirst is a sign of pre-diabetes and diabetes. If I'm thirsty and I go drink juice, then I'm going to make my situation much worse, right? So the fruits, always go with fruits first. A lot of these fruits are designed to improve bowel function. A lot of fruits are great vitamin C for your skin. A lot of these fruits help with bloating and gas issues. So again, maybe, like she said, suck a grapefruit in the morning, drink a glass of water, that's your juice. So that's important, and you can infuse with fruits and so forth, because juice and soda do not even need to be digested, and they are just a hard no, right? So that's in terms of what to avoid. Next is really just a quick breakdown of what to do if you're dealing with insulin resistance. Sorry for those who are in here at the very top of the hour. What I will do is quickly just give the 5 classic signs of insulin resistance. Again, the first sign really would be you have a very acute attack of hunger. I'm going to recap for the people that just joined in. So you have these hunger episodes, and with that you start getting symptoms with your hunger. You're very jittery, shaky, feel to faint. That means your sugar levels are not balanced. The second sign, which is one of the most major signs, is central weight gain. You have these normal looking arms and your legs are thin, but your tummy is where you carry most of your weight. That's sign number 2, that you may be dealing with an insulin resistance issue. And then sign 3 would be you're not losing weight, and you know you're trying your best to do so, and your weight is plateaued. Can we do club soda instead? You can. Not a fan of it as a constant daily intake, because it is processed. There's salts that are added into club soda, and that can cause other issues. Club soda has great value for sometimes for an indigestion or an upset stomach, but it should not be your source of hydration. It really shouldn't, because it's not water, and it is a carbonated beverage. It has been processed, and they do put salt into club soda, and you have to be very careful when you bloat with your salt intake as well. So my preference, just regular water, flavored water, coconut water. So the third sign was your weight is plateauing no matter what, and you're being really good, you're working out, and nothing's working. That's a sign of insulin resistance. Sign number 4 is acanthosis, which is a skin change that happens. And sign number 5 would be skin tags. So we talked about what to avoid. Basically, I said no white sugar, no sugars at all, no white bread, no white flour, white potatoes, pasta, and no juice or soda. Please, no juice or soda. So what to do? And the what to do is short, but probably the hardest part of all of this. And what to do means that you really have to focus on your diet. Make your diet, there's a question here. Oh, club soda is awesome for car batteries. That's funny. What treatment is taken for PCOS? So the PCOS treatment, someone asked about that earlier. It's multi-layered. With regards to tonight's topic, which is insulin resistance and signs of insulin resistance, 70% of women with PCOS do have this issue where their insulin is ineffective. So the treatment comes down to treating what's wrong. And that's essentially PCOS. If someone has PCOS, they may have acne. So we treat acne as it needs to be. They suffer with hirsutism, which is excessive facial hair growth. They have thinning of the hair on the head. That's treated as well too. So we treat PCOS based on the symptom that manifests, because PCOS is an umbrella condition with many different symptoms. We can have 100 women under the umbrella of PCOS, and 10 may have one symptom, another 20 may have another. So we treat based on what is needed. For the treatment of insulin resistance with regards to PCOS, there are two main options that work about the same in terms of what the studies have shown, but one works more readily, more rapidly, which is metformin. Metformin is an insulin sensitizer. It's a tablet that's taken a lot of times for women with polycystic ovarian syndrome to improve their insulin resistance, improve and sensitize their body to work better. That key unlock theory of the insulin opening the door to get the glucose into the cell works better with metformin. There is a herbal supplement that's called ovasitol or inositol. You find it in the herbal stores. I'm not advertising for any companies, but there's a sample. This is an example of a multivitamin that literally does include the inositol in it as an insulin sensitizer for metabolism. So if we're dealing with treatment for PCOS with relation to insulin resistance, then we would actually improve insulin sensitivity. That's one of the treatments. Low carb diet, which would be more of a ketogenic or keto diet, is endorsed as well for treatment of insulin resistance. But the low carb diet really can't not be restrictive. Do not restrict, do not starve. The jury is still out about intermittent fasting as a result, because a lot of times when you're dealing with sugar balance, if you fast or restrict, when you do eat, you actually may be worsening the process. So my advice is usually to eat very regularly and eat healthy, and try to stay on the high protein, low carb side of things, which would basically be a ketogenic diet. And exercise, that's a huge part of this. And that's the hardest part of it. Look at the hour. It's late. It's almost 9 o'clock. And everyone's worked today, and you're telling me to go exercise now. So there's no way to manage insulin without that. So it's important to sort of work that in. And I always say never miss 3 days of working out. Always try to get some form of an activity, walking, yoga, something to just drive your muscles for toning purposes and for burning fat. So there's a couple here. Someone says, I had the first sign a few times when I went to get tested for diabetes, and they told me it was anxiety and to come back when it was under control. Okay, so I'm not sure of the specifics of that, but if you tested and your test did not show that there were any abnormalities, then, there's always something else to figure out. So I'm sorry that's your story, but luckily you didn't have diabetes, which is good, but this still applies to anyone, diabetic or not. Trini Vinci says, what is the name of the tablet? So I wasn't trying to give a brand. It's a local vitamin store with 3 letters in the name. And it's a energy and metabolism multivitamin that they brought in, and I really saw that they did try to incorporate antioxidants, which are important, and also they did include the inositol in this one as well. But any of these vitamins, when you look online, you just start learning to read labels and see what's useful for you. Still on the what to do part of things, vitamin D, which I have not touched on. We'll definitely do another talk on vitamin D, because insulin is a hormone, as I said at the beginning, and a lot of people don't appreciate it as a hormone. When you think hormones, you think ovaries, you think hair and skin, but insulin is one of the main hormones we need. You're welcome. The relationship with vitamin D is very complex, and a lot of our symptoms day to day, fatigue, insomnia, my knee hurts, my weight isn't budging, foggy brain, a lot of times we're lacking vitamin D, and we get it from the sun. But I found, now that I live and work in the Caribbean, I find more vitamin D deficiencies here than I did abroad in the States. And the only thing I could think of is people don't like the sun. And when the sun is blazing hot, you're indoors in the AC here. So vitamin D sometimes may be the answer for a lot of your vague body aches and cramps and symptoms, and also weight and weight management. And it is tied into the whole mechanism of processing of our carbohydrates as well too. So this is what to do. Focus on your diet, make it a thing, make your diet the star player. I tell people in the office, a lot of times it's the environment we're in, it's the household we're in. I'm not the one making the groceries, or I'm not the one cooking. Start taking ownership over your nutrition and your diet. If the office staff is going out for, that's great. Beautiful. If the office staff is going out for a meal, for lunch, or whatever the case may be, still stick to your diet, stick to your focus. Meal prepping is always helpful in these situations, but not always practical. So even if you have to buy out, make it make sense. So focus on the nutrition. That's what you need to do if you have any issues. And this can simply be the one thing to resolve your insulin resistance. The supplement I talk about, it's called ovasitol or inositol or myo-inositol, inositol. You can find it online. It's a plant-based supplement. So really no major side effects, and it is an alternative to consider if you've tried metformin, which is a synthetic insulin sensitizer that does have some side effects. But metformin is a more rapid way to reverse insulin. It works really well for acanthosis. So a lot of times someone who's suffering with insulin resistance will do really well to initiate their treatment with the metformin, get it down to a more balanced situation, and then sort of dial back and start doing the more natural approach to things as well too. And that way they are sort of shortening their time to the becoming a diabetic. So Corinne, hi. So you have nausea with metformin. So yes, again, side effects may happen with metformin. It works in two main ways, and that's why the side effects happen. So metformin, yes, there are two forms. There's rapid release and there's extended release. The extended release tends to work over a 24-hour period to improve how your insulin works. Within that 24-hour period, it is moderating and reducing your blood glucose levels. The instant release, if I'm going to eat right now, I'm going to take it, it's going to lower my sugar right now. The metformin side effects, however, because metformin works in two ways. It works in our liver, and it works where we, sort of like Lego, when we're making those little blocks of glucose. It blocks that process, so you don't have as much glucose being churned out by the liver. So it interrupts new glucose production in the liver. And then the second way that metformin works, it works in the small intestine by blocking absorption. So someone talked about carb blockers that are advertised, and I try to stay away from a lot of those things because a lot of them are not tested, not field tested, not FDA approved. A lot of those carb blockers are just random substances that they can sell, and there's no testing or no transparency system to know for sure what you're on. And the problem with those carb blockers, are you going to stay on that all your life? No. So when you come off of it, you do have this rebound weight gain that can happen. Back to the metformin, however, it works in the liver and it also works in the small intestine. So if it's blocking how much sugar I'm making, and then on top of that, it's blocking absorption of sugar and fat in my intestines, what I eat and what time I eat will produce the symptoms I get. And that's just a broad brush that I've painted out with. If you have been on it and you still don't feel well, then you can try the inositol, right? Someone's asking if you can take inositol with Amaryl. I would probably have to get back to you somehow with that one, or maybe send us a DM. There are some drug interactions that are noteworthy with the herbal supplements. I don't think that's one of them, to be honest, but I would need to look that up to let you know. But if I'm on metformin, I've been placed on it because my A1C is pre-diabetic or my weight isn't budging and I'm trying to use it as a tool, I have to eat. Whether it's the extended release or the instant release, I cannot skip those meals because I'm taking something that's actually working to reduce my blood glucose levels. So I will feel nausea, I'll feel faint, I'll get headaches if I still have that. I'm not a breakfast person, or I got so busy at work and I haven't eaten. So definitely eating on time, and then what you choose to eat. It blocks absorption of carbohydrates and fat in the intestines. So people tell me, oh, it's giving me diarrhea. And I'm like, well, was it after the Haagen-Dazs? When did you get the diarrhea? So you tend to get the diarrhea after you've eaten something high fat content, and the stomach cramps, and even the nausea. So it depends on what you chose to eat. So as you are taking this medication, you kind of literally need a food diary to understand, I felt good on these days and I did not feel good on these days as well. And if you really can't tolerate it, then you can try another option, which would be the inositol, right? So those are the things to really hone in on as to what to do if you have an insulin resistance. The final thing I want to touch on is really just putting a note here, because several people who will also have diabetes eventually. And I want to touch on that because diabetes is pretty much an epidemic right now in a lot of societies. Definitely here in Trinidad, definitely in the Caribbean, we're struggling with diabetes. The healthcare system is overburdened with it. So based on everything I've said in the last 55 minutes, if you are at all concerned about your health, definitely seek medical attention, get screened, figure out if this is what you're struggling with, because you could avoid becoming a diabetic. And I just want to say that the two types of diabetes, just to clarify, there's type 1. Type 1 happens from childhood onwards, and it's basically my pancreas is a problem. It just doesn't, it stopped making insulin, or it doesn't make insulin. Type 2, 90% of adults with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. And that's where the body stops responding to normal insulin or high levels of insulin. So your body is just like, I don't want to, that insulin doesn't work for me. Whereas in type 1, you don't make the insulin. With type 2, most people with type 2 have a family member with it. So if you look left, you look right, and there are diabetics in your family, and you're dealing with acanthosis, you have skin tags, central belly fat, and all of these things, then definitely seek some medical attention and get evaluated, because there's a first, a 5 to 10 time elevated risk if their first degree relative has diabetes, that you will become a diabetic, and usually before age 40, which is a big deal. So if you have other medical problems in the family, cholesterol, blood pressure, hypertension, then definitely you want to get screened. And that's it in a nutshell for tonight. I think we made it up to 8:57. It's going to be just an hour of me chatting. I really, really appreciate everyone who's been in here with us tonight. I appreciate the questions. I'm going to try to be more comfortable doing this on a weekly basis, so you guys have a platform, especially with the lockdown we're in, to at least start having some more open discussions about some of these conditions that impact a lot of us. So I want to wrap this up and say thank you, everyone, for hanging with me for the hour. And I'll try to put my notes together as a post as well on our Instagram at some point by the weekend. And this was dealing with insulin resistance, but there's a lot more that we can talk about. And the recipes, gotcha. Definitely. And thank you, everyone. And you can also DM us as well too. You can find us at azaleahealthtt.com and also on all the social media platforms. Thank you, and maybe let's try to get a workout in the morning. Have a good night. You're welcome.